And they basically told me in so many words, this is always how it's been done, means that they are not aware of our ethical guidelines. They are not aware of what it takes to become a licensed provider. They are not aware that if you do not get proper supervision, what that will mean for you and your clients in the future when you were out there working and supposed to be changing lives, right? They don't understand any of this. And so hey, grateful day, everyone. My name is Dr. TK. If you are new here, welcome. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and therapist business coach, and I have been doing a series on supervision gone wrong, bare minimum, what you should look for in a supervision site if you want to become a contractual clinical supervisor, and also how should you set up your students for success. And so I am going to wrap up this series by talking about, and it's definitely not funny, so I don't even know why I'm laughing right now, but I'm going to break down 4 red flags of what happened in real life. This is not something that's in a textbook. This is real life situations that have happened actually at one site. Okay. So if you have not watched the other part of the series, I would highly recommend it because it is going to set the tone for story time today. All right. So let's hop into it. Let me grab my notes because I want to make sure that I do not miss a flag. All right. So red flag number 1 is not enough hours. Okay. And so as I had mentioned in the previous portion of this series is when I was brought on, I recognized that all the supervision duties and activities was happening in a 2-hour time frame. Now, clearly the problem with this is I don't see clinically, ethically, and time management wise how someone can run a supervision group with 8 interns, read their progress notes, give feedback in their progress notes, sign their progress notes, and make sure that they are growing as a clinician through supervision of their cases all at the same damn time. Okay. So once I got onboarded and I started to recognize that, okay, 1 or 2 students based on their board, based on whether they were still in school or postgraduate, they had particular requirements so that they had to do group supervision and 1 hour of individual supervision. When I started clocking my hours, the math wasn't mathing. And I slowly started to realize that the allotted amount of hours that I was contracted to do would just not suffice in order for me to properly supervise individuals. And so not everybody had to do the one-on-one. And to be real, that was helpful because I was able to go over the feedback for the progress notes, for the intake, and anything else that me and that supervisee needed to talk about, clinical skills, delivery of the clinical skills, and what the client did in therapy and all the things, right? We were able to do that with that 1 or 2 students, but not all 8. And so over time, as I just started taking note of what the students were actually not getting out of the basic clinical supervision hour, I took it to the admin executive and the person who hired me. And they basically told me in so many words, this is always how it's been done. And keep in mind, they're non-clinical. They have a big heart, but they're non-clinical, which means that they are not aware of our ethical guidelines. They are not aware of what it takes to become a licensed provider. They are not aware that if you do not get proper supervision, what that will mean for you and your clients in the future when you were out there working and supposed to be changing lives, right? They don't understand any of this. And so I thought, without stepping on anyone's toes, that I could set up a meeting where I could paint the picture of what has been happening in real time because that person is not sitting in the supervision hour. And I wanted to match it with what they were seeing in terms of client no-shows, clients not growing in treatment, why certain court mandated paperwork and progress letters were written in the way that they were in terms of no growth. To me, all of this comes full circle to, well, yeah, the clients aren't growing if the clinicians are not growing. Hello. So ultimately I was told no, but not right now, which meant that they would pass me off to their money person. So keep that in mind. But the answer right now was no. So I did have a decision to make. I can keep going or I can quit. And I'm just like, okay, I've only been here like 3 weeks. And so let me just see what this money person says. In the midst of that, I'm going to try to make it work. And what that meant was that your girl was reviewing paperwork outside of whatever additional amount of hours that I needed to get paid. I didn't get paid, but I cannot let these clinicians just me sign off on hours without reading it because that's my license on the line. Hello. Okay. So red flag under that is like 1A was, and this should be separate, but I'm just going to call it 1A because this was in that conversation I had with her, is HIPAA violations. So I'm going to give you the setup of the supervision. It was in a subletted office with many offices in a big building. And it was set up like a little outpatient clinic. So when you walk in, you can go left and then you are technically in the administrative little office. If you go straight, you're in the weight room. The administrative office, clearly you can walk and go left. And then there was another door that you can exit out to the weight room to then walk through another hallway. And it's kind of like a little mini circle. And then when you go down a mini hallway, you have like 3 to 4 offices. Okay. And so the reason why that was a HIPAA violation is, imagine if there's something happening in the core area in that weight room. Let's just say we're having supervision, but intern so-and-so decided, I guess supervision ain't that important for me to show up on time, or my client keep talking and I don't know how to reel it in. And so I'm going to be late to my clinical supervision hour. So that's already striking one for me. Okay. So then you're late, but you can't really, I guess, interrupt the group. So you decide to walk your client through a HIPAA private area called the administrative area with EHR on the screen. That was another HIPAA violation. Somebody walking away, not locking their freaking computer. And then also just file cabinets open. Paperwork with progress letters for court mandated individuals just outside, you know what I'm saying, in his office. And so your girl got a big problem with that. And so they walked the client through it. And when I brought it up to them individually, they didn't even see that it was a problem with it. And I said, okay, so this is what's about to happen. So I decided to add that to their training in our group supervision of what is not about to happen. One, my policy is we're not being late for supervision. You need to wrap up your session by the 45-minute mark or not put a client right before supervision if you don't have good time management skills. Hello. Next is when you walk out a client, even when we're not in supervision, never ever walk a client through the administrative area because there are HIPAA violations. That's when a whole can of worms opened up and they started telling me about all these other HIPAA violations in terms of there is no password there. There is no password there. That's not even locked all the time. Okay, so now I got to have another meeting with this individual, meaning the executive. Okay. And so I'm just, again, clocking stuff on a sheet of paper. I'm not trying to call this lady every single day, but at some point, something got to change. But I don't want to be that person that just comes in and try to like rearrange your whole setup. But I also can't understand why no other supervisor has caught on to this unless they also might be doing the bare minimum and they just don't care because they get paid. I don't know, but that's not me. Okay. So that's all in one of the bare minimum. No. And I don't see what's wrong with this HIPAA violation. Okay. Let's go on to flag number 2. All right. So flag number 2 is resistance. Resistance, not from the administrator, but from interns. So this is what resistance looks like. I'm going to come to supervision late. When I come to supervision, the stuff that you're requesting that we do with case presentation, I'm not doing it. Now, this is my belief. This individual was probably double my age, and they came in with I've been doing work like this, even though they're not licensed, for a long time. I've been doing also pastoral work and all these things in the spiritual realm. And I just felt like, based off of how they showed up, the lack of things that they brought into supervision that everybody else brought based off my requests for them to grow, and also prepping them for job interviews. It's like I know it already attitude, a haughty attitude. Okay. And so needless to say, there was a lot of pushback. And I don't like when that happens for me to give direct feedback in front of the whole group, because depending on what that person's mindset is like, that can be a blow to the ego. And on top of that, yes, it was a male. And it was actually at that time the only male therapist. I think there were some before I came, but it was a swap of staff or team members, interns. And so speed things up. I found out that the person had an interview. So when I find out that they have an interview, and I told them, tell me when you have an interview, especially if it's within this county, tell me the name of the facility, because I'm very familiar with the county because I used to work there in various positions. I made good relationships with people on the up and up. And there is a difference between directly operated county facilities and non-directed facilities, right? But at the end of the day, all of them have to adhere to this great old deal of paperwork that I'm attempting to teach you how to do in this agency. That way, when you go and apply, you can say, oh, I've already been exposed to the county way. Okay. And if you've ever worked for, I'm just going to say it, Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, they tell us if you can learn how to do county paperwork, you can work from anywhere. You can work from anywhere because it's a lot of freaking paperwork. Okay. And so that's pretty much what I was bringing into the supervision service. So this person refused and refused. They go to the job interview. Well, I tell you what, it was a humbling experience. They came back a whole new man. Before supervision started, they said, can I talk to you on a break? Because I give them like a 10-minute break during the 2-hour time frame, because some of them had just finished seeing clients. And I said, of course, how did the interview go? And they were like, that's what I want to talk to you about. So we meet, and to make a long story short, they proceed to tell me that they bombed the interview. Everything that I had been trying to get them to do at that point in supervision was basically what they asked them to do. And keep in mind, if you watch my previous video, I'll link the whole series below. I talked a lot about case formulation actually in my last video of step-by-step onboarding the intern and being able to train them, not just supervise them. And what this gentleman had said was they gave him a case vignette and he had to break down the clinical loop, because that's what I had taught them. So we know what that means out here. And ultimately, he had to pull all the pieces of the case together and talk about diagnoses, treatment plan goals, what would the therapy look like. And these may sound basic if you're licensed and you've been in the game for a while and you're seasoned. But for someone who is still accumulating their hours, I don't care what their background has been, thorough, good supervision and training will teach you how to prepare, not just for interviews, but for the freaking exam. Because the exam, whether it be the regular exam in certain states or the ethics exam, if you have that in your state, some states only have like an ethics exam or something like that. But nevertheless, I know that in California, we have 2 up to 3. And so I want to prepare you in the most rigorous way possible. That way, when you see it, you feel like it's nothing. Okay. And so he said that he took very much advantage of the opportunity that he had in the supervision hour. And he's going to show up differently because he realizes that all I was trying to do was prepare him, being a grown ass man, excuse my language, to the real clinical world out here in these streets. Okay. And so, I didn't gloat. I was just like, blah, blah, blah. I'm glad that you were able to want to come and talk to me about this experience. And if you wouldn't mind, can you share with the other students in our supervision hour, either this week or next week, just what was the interview process like? I don't need you to share unless you want to what it was like for you. Now, this was also a second level humbling experience. He chose, based off his intuitive nudge, to actually share with the whole group what his aha moment was in terms of taking advantage of the training. And that made the other interns pay more attention than what they already were. And at that point, when I tell you those case conceptualizations, the presentation was just at a top tier, another level, literally the week after. Listen, everything does not happen by happenstance or accident. I believe that everything happens for a reason, but I wanted to share that with you because as a supervisor going into another site or even in your own private practice, you at some point might run into even an employee that is disgruntled, come in with their own ways. And as a CEO, you're not a person, you are a leader and you have to learn effective communication skills. Okay. All right. So now let's go into red flag number 3 and let's circle back to that bare minimum. So I finally received a phone call from the money person. And this person asked me to break down week by week what my hours looked like. I wasn't fidangling the hours. I wasn't padding the hours. I did a time audit and I took them step by step of what I did throughout each week. Now, let me just insert this. Okay. If you want to learn how to do a appropriate time audit, even in your own private practice, and you want to learn how to understand where your time is going, because maybe, just maybe, you can't add the other stream of income or you can't add the intern because you're so exhausted and at capacity with what you already have going on. I want you to grab my private practice profitability playbook. It is an introduction to our private practice mentorship world where I'm not only helping you audit your time, I'm also helping you design your dream schedule. I'm helping you do private practice math. I'm helping you understand where you're leaving money on the table. And it also comes with a business checklist, whether you are just starting or you want to make sure that your business at the regular level is in place for you to put your eyes on another prize, AKA another stream of income. I want to make sure that your private practice is in order. Then grab the private practice profitability playlist. You can playbook. You can look at that or check that out in the description box. Okay, moving on. So after I laid out my time audit, they said, thank you for letting me know. Unfortunately, we will only be able to grant you the amount of hours that you have. You will have to make it work with what you have. And in that moment, I realized I'm going to still have a meeting with the admin and let her know my thoughts. But there's no way that I can, and I tell him, I cannot ethically continue signing off on progress notes if I can't review them. And they said, well, the other person did. And I said, well, here's the picture. That's when they realized like, okay, there's definitely something wrong with the system. But unfortunately, there's no other room for movement of payment. And I said, okay, well, to be honest, I don't know how long I'm going to be here because that's not going to work for the ethics of these students. So I decided, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but I decided to actually talk to the students about just a smidge of my concerns around not being able to review all of their charts and their progress notes to provide them with feedback because my biggest thing is to help them grow. I'm going to have a conversation with the admin in the next 2 weeks, but I'm just giving y'all a heads up. If they cannot extend my hours and I cannot review y'all paperwork outside of this hour, because you see how important these hours are of helping you grow in your clinical skills and conceptualizing cases and answering whatever questions you have, I can't double dip and be listening and writing at the same time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue supervision here. I didn't get no pushback. Because in those moments, they were realizing that transparency is key and they saw where my heart was. I'm not saying that they were geeked up about if they lost to me as a supervisor, but what they did say, because I gave them room to talk about it, they said, it's just frustrating that people are not looking out for our best interests. So we talked about it. Okay, now for this last red flag. Now, y'all better go ahead and get something to drink for this, okay? So when I do supervision, I'm typically in that room, in the whole clinic, technically, by myself with the students. No administrative staff are typically there. Now, in the midst of this, I believe the week before, I called a meeting with the admin and talked about this whole money progress, no signing issue, review chart issue. And they basically said, there's nothing they can do. And they said, where else have you worked where they do X, Y, and Z? So I explained to them other places that I have worked or even been a student. And they said, well, that place sounds fancy. I love my people. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But you should be more open-minded. I'm not asking you to give me $1,000 extra a month. I'm asking you to do what's right for the students, or at least have the correct level of expectations of what I can and cannot do for your agency in order for it to be ethical. Ethical, right? So in so many words, I just said, and this rubbed her the wrong way, but hey, if you know me, you know me. At this point, I'm tired of having this conversation. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, but I'm going to say what's on my mind in the most assertive way. And I just said, I feel like at this point, these students are getting the bare minimum of clinical supervision. Oh, she was appalled. The bare minimum. She didn't yell or anything, but she was just like, what do you mean? And I said, we're only giving them, and that's what she said. She said, well, the board says all they need is 2 hours of group supervision. I said, while that is the board requirement, that is not the clinical requirement based on the work that you're having them do. That didn't sit well, but it is what it is. So the following week, whether it was a week or two in between, we were at supervision. She wasn't there. In the midst of the first 15 minutes, knock, knock, knock on the door. Ain't nobody late. You shouldn't have any clients. I go and open up the door. It's a server. A subpoena. Now, we do work with court-mandated individuals in which these interns do like anger management and all these kind of groups and individual therapy, and they're approved by the court. So that's another reason why, AKA, I'm really tight on this paperwork. Court, we don't play with court, okay? Because at any given time, they can subpoena your whole chart. You can contest it. I've done that with the jails, but if the judge wants the whole thing after you've contested it multiple times, saying, oh, I can give you this, I can give you that, the judge can just outright say, absolutely not. Give me the whole chart, okay? So I said, what are you here for? And they said one of the clinicians' name. It was actually the gentleman who had one of that job interview. So I said, give me a moment, because I didn't even want to confirm if the person was there. I'm like, I don't even know what this is about. And so the server was a young person. So I went back in, closed the door, and I pulled the person to the side. I said, hey, let's take a break. Pulled the person to the side and said, it's a subpoena about this client, and it's going to you. He said, I'm not going out there to sign a subpoena. Now, I'm not going to make him go out there and sign a subpoena. He is a student. So what do? You call the administrator. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. Text message. No text message back for a whole 2 hours. 911. No call, no text. At this point, I can see my messages are being delivered. Are you just outright ignoring us? Multiple people call. Nothing. So then it turns into a vent box. I got to try to contain that, because then they're like bare minimum, kind of vibe or whatever. And so then I go back out and I'm like, well, you can't deliver it because I can't accept a subpoena for someone else. They say, okay, do you have this person here? They then list out the administrator. I said, oh, 911 again. You need to call me back. No calls. Supervision, let's just say it's done at 8 o'clock. We do 6 to 8. I get a phone call on my drive back home at about 8:45. Hey, Dr. Jackson, I saw you calling. 911, what's the problem? Is there an emergency? And I told her what happened. And she said, oh, I'm not coming down there. Like it just went left. In that moment, I was like, oh, you don't have nobody's back. I'm not about to get caught up in subpoenas. And ultimately, just sidebar, the subpoenas were on. This was actually the week I quit. Gave my 2 weeks notice and I left. Did a departing with the students and all the things. But what I learned from that subpoena situation was proper, get this, documentation. The client said they were doing group services between this day and this day. The documentation said they were doing groups during this day and this day. The judge didn't know if the agency was lying or the client was lying. So they needed to see the copy the client got and the copy we had to, see if there was some fedangling of paperwork. Now, the paperwork was handled before I started working there, so I couldn't even vouch for, well, that was the original date. Then we go back to the chart. No updated progress notes. not detailed in the intake. I can't make this shit up. All right. So, of course, I make supervision about this. The things that you're taught in ethics is not a game. It might sound fake until it becomes real. I'm sharing all of this because I need you as a either intern and or a clinical supervisor to understand why documentation is so important, why good training is so important. If you're on the student side and you feel like this is doing too much, this is asking too much of my time, it's only asking too much of your time because you ain't never got no subpoena. You ain't never been faced with having to take the exam, maybe yet, and feeling like you're not well prepared. On the flip side, don't be a licensed provider and do the bare minimum and just say, well, the paperwork says 1 hour of supervision, so that's all I'm doing. That is not the way that our industry is going to grow. And so what I want you to do is go down to the comment box. First of all, tell me what was the most audacious red flag that you heard in this video. Secondly is, what is something that we can leave in the comment box for another student to help pay it forward of how would you or have you shown up in supervision, not as the bare minimum? What is one thing that you have added to the training manual or guide, or when you were a student, what is one thing that your site did that made you feel like they're going above and beyond? Okay. So again, if you want that private practice profitability playbook so that you can understand your time, build out a profitable private practice with understanding basic systems that should be in place, grab that. Now, if you also are licensed and you are working toward, or you are a clinical supervisor and you are teeter-totter or low-key, or maybe even becoming a group supervisor, but you want to enhance becoming and attracting the right supervisees to you, then I want you to grab my supervision guide starter kit. This is for both contractual clinical supervisors, and it is for those who may want interns under their scope of their practice to give them clients, but they also want to be able to attract the right people. And it is a lot of stuff in that supervision guide, from interview questionnaires to what are some ethical basics that you need to know. I will also link that guide in the show notes. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and I will talk to y'all soon. Bye.